Parliamentary reporter dictation number 28 and the dictation speed is 150 words per minute. Ready? Start. Sir, I should like here to mention that the Railway Accidents Committee has referred to the fact that derailments are more on the narrow gauge and meter gauge sections. Now, it has also been pointed out that the narrow gauge sections over a period of 5 years have incurred a loss which works out to about rupees 22 crores. It is the total sum invested in the Chittaranjan locomotive works. If we are running the meter gauge and the narrow gauge lines at a loss, and if we are not able to maintain satisfactory efficiency of operation which the public have a right to expect, I would like to ask the Minister whether political consideration should come in the way of our closing down the meter gauge and narrow gauge lines. I know that the question will be asked, what would the public have by way of transport if meter gauge and narrow gauge sections are closed down? My answer to that is that this has got to be a phased program. If we are not in a position to operate them at a profit, the railways themselves can run bus services. It is always open to the railways to expand their field of operation. I may mention, sir, that recently I had been to the United Kingdom and I had stayed at some of the hotels run by the British Railway Administration. They were extremely well run and well conducted hotels. It shows that the British Railways are not bound down only to running of railway transport. It is open to the railway administration to run transport services in those areas where meter gauge and narrow gauge lines were working and which had to be closed down because they were uneconomical to run. I would suggest to the railway minister to have a full-fledged inquiry conducted into the efficiency of operation of the meter gauge and narrow gauge lines. Sir, I would like to go on to another aspect about the efficiency of working of the railways. The Kunjuru Committee has referred in detailed terms to the work of the Railway Inspectorate. I know that the Railway Inspectorate is working at the moment under the Ministry of Transport and Communications and they keep a very close relation with the Railway Ministry. Unfortunately, the committee itself mentions that the work of the Inspectorate has been unsatisfactory at all times. I feel, sir, that the time has come for us to suggest to the government that the Inspectorate of the Railways should be placed directly under the President in the same way in which the Auditor General functions today and the Attorney General functions today. There is no reason why the inspectorate should be under the Ministry of Transport and Communications. If the Railway Inspectorate is placed directly under the President, it means we have to recruit separate staff for the purpose. I am not happy with the present arrangement under which officers from the railways are seconded to the Railway Inspectorate. A question may be asked whether the Railway Inspectorate can discharge its functions if its members do not have practical experience of the working of the railways. I may here quote the British example. I was told that in the United Kingdom, the Railway Inspectorate is staffed largely by army personnel. What is required is not that a person should have worked for so many years in the railways, but a person who is alert and who has a critical mind. It is open to the government to see that a separate cadre is recruited for the Railway Inspectorate. Unfortunately, the Railway Inspectorate has not been functioning properly, and that is why so many collisions and derailments have taken place. That is why the rolling stock has not been properly supervised. The report contains many details about defective maintenance of tracks in the various railways which they have investigated. I hope that the mind about the future of the Railway Inspectorate, because it is the Inspectorate alone that can be the watchdog of the public and see to it that the railways maintain a satisfactory rate of efficiency of operation. Sir, some of the previous speakers made a reference to the need for reserving 25% of the posts in the railways for the children of railway servants. I am behind none in paying my tribute to the loyal work done by the railway servants in the various zonal railways and to the rectitude with which many of them have discharged their duties, but I must confess that I am not in agreement with the distinguished chairman of the Railway Accidents Committee and his colleagues when they make this recommendation. The demands of science are very great indeed, and we should not grudge making the requisite allocations for scientific research. I think Mr. Humayun Kabir was quite right when, at the conference of scientists and educationists, he suggested that at least 1% of the national income should be allocated for scientific research and so on. I think it is not a very big demand. At present, we spend only rupees 40 crores, and that is not by any account an adequate sum which is needed in order even to implement what has been spelled out in the Scientific Policy Resolution of 1958. What is the use of passing a resolution and declaring from the top of the house to the world and at the same time not making adequate financial allocations in order to carry out the tasks set out in that resolution? Therefore, the blame in this matter largely lies with the government and the cabinet. The cabinet, I do not know, has very many committees under it, but it should pay a little more attention to scientific research, and I think everything should be done in order to meet their financial requirements. The finance minister of the country should be asked to find money for scientific research, because here if you spend money you extend your exploration of the uncharted resources of our country that will lead to an increase in production. Also, in various other scientific fields, the scientific urge for work will lead to increase in national wealth. Therefore, whatever we may spend today out of your financial resources or even by deficit financing, if you like, that will be more than rewarded by the rapid strides that we would be making a few years after as a result of scientific investigations, discoveries, and so on. That is very important. We should have a far-sighted view in this matter, and we must try to see beyond our nose. As far as the finance minister is concerned, when it comes to science, he certainly does not see beyond his nose, and that is the trouble with him. Will the honorable minister in charge of scientific affairs kindly pull up his colleague in the cabinet meetings and tell him as to how he should pay a little more attention to the problems and requirements of science in the progress of India? We have today, for example, 25,000 persons engaged in scientific work. This is not adequate at all for a vast country like this and a developing country like this. We want to develop apace. Therefore, that number is far too inadequate in proportion to the size of the country. The number of science graduates and technical graduates again is not very large. Therefore, these figures can be gone into. I do not wish to take your time by giving these figures, but I think any scientist will tell you that in this matter we have been rather deficient, and we are not aware that in order to go ahead in bigger strides, we must put on the field a large number of scientific workers, and how can it be done unless the entire system is properly organized and the resources are found? Additional funds are therefore particularly essential to put into commission a larger number of scientific workers for carrying out the tasks even as they have been set out in the scientific policy resolution. Here then comes the question of utilization of funds in the most economic manner. I regret to say from a layman's study of some of the things that the funds are not being properly utilized. I am not blaming the scientists in this connection. It is the job of the administrators to see that funds are properly utilized, and for one thing they should be based on definite projects within the framework of the national program. There should not be any desultory flow in this or that direction. It should be given a purpose and based on a certain project. Apart from other things, therefore, research work has got to be project oriented in a developing economy such as we have.